I'm back on Careers in Discovery with Kenny Duncan of Accent Therapeutics. Kenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
I'm really pleased to see you and really looking forward to getting into your career. We haven't had a chemist on the show for a while, so I'm excited to talk about your journey through medicinal chemistry. And it'd be great to start with what you're up to now. So Accent Therapeutics, tell me about RNA modifying proteins.
Happy to. So yeah, I've been with Accent for about 4.5 years now. Accent was set up about 7 years ago to really delve into a lot of the enzymes that were using and modifying, manipulating RNA. So you could really
Hmm.
tap into the key biology, RNA biology there, but using so novel exploratory biology, but really trying to go at it from enzymology path. One of our key founders was Bob Copeland, who's written the book on enzymology.
Yes.
And so we wanted to try and take that approach, bit of a balance between difficult novel biology and a true tried and tested approach into drug discovery.
Hmm.
However, it's we've what we've discovered is as the company's gone on is yes, we've got a phenomenal deep insight into RNA biology, but a lot of the targets we really want to go for are not necessarily straightforward. But I
Yes.
think we've done a phenomenal job to really try and find nanomolar and picomolar inhibitors of a lot of our targets we're looking for. So, and with any luck, we'll be in the clinic very soon for a couple of those. So yeah, it's been a great time.
Fantastic. And so as you say, sort of combining this tried and true approach
Yeah.
with novel complex biology, and your role there is to run the chemistry side of the
Yes.
business as well as some other bits and pieces, I believe.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I joined. I joined initially as kind of chemistry
Yeah.
to really head up the chemistry department and build the chemistry department out. Since then, I've taken on responsibility for DMPK and some preclinical development as well. So
Yes.
as we have the target, as our lead discovery and biology teams find the target, develop the assays that allow us to prosecute it when it's time and we have a starting point, a hit point. My team really gets stuck in to go from that point to try and find a candidate and usher it into the clinic as well. So it's been
Fantastic.
fun to expand my role a little bit and really take every aspect of most aspects of the drug discovery process right through to the first in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk more about that, I think. Yeah, I think, it's generally well known that we need more chemists in the biotech industry, right? And that there are some therapies that are being developed now that aren't chemistry focused with,
Mhm.
gene therapies and things like that, but still the bulk of medicines that we have are chemical entities, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about, I guess, where you spend most of your time, where you see the role of chemistry in biotech today. That's a broad question, I appreciate,
It's a
but
very broad question.
yeah, yeah, tell us a bit
Um,
about that.
yeah, so where I spend my time is really helping the teams really try to address what do we think is the right candidate for this target. First
Yes.
of all, I think the approach, working with early discovery folks, what is the right approach to drugging that target once we actually understand the biology? And then once you identify the right approach to drugging that target, how do we do it? How do we build it? And how do we identify this as candidate space and novel
Hmm.
targets? If you are going on a best in class or another approach like that, you have an idea of where you're going. You have obviously benchmarks that you want to be able to hit, but
Yes.
quite often you're working out exactly what the candidate needs to look like, what the performance needs to look like. It's generally applicable across targets, but every single one, depending on the chemotype you have, slightly different PK profiles,
Hmm.
slightly different residence times, etc. So you have to balance that and find the right approach for that target. So it's helping the teams really identify what that profile needs to look like, and then helping to deliver and ask the right questions to make sure we get there in the right time.
Yeah, I
So,
see. So
yeah,
really, really driving the effectiveness of the compound, really making sure that
yeah,
you're optimizing everything that you have,
correct.
all those kinds of things.
But most importantly, to be able to do that is to build the right organization to allow
Yeah.
that, the right thought processes and the way to interrogate things and know when we don't have the right tool and to
Yeah,
go
of
find it
course.
and how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about medicinal chemistry as a whole, as I touched on there, because I think we need more chemists entering the industry,
Yeah.
as I've said, and I think there is a trend towards biology recently, in terms of the kind of newer technology that's coming out, and it's always the newer stuff that people get, especially young people, get more excited about. But medicinal chemistry remains, you know, the core discipline of
Yeah.
the drug development industry. Um,
It's
Tell
still
us a bit
very.
about, yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, sorry, Tom. I think I agree with that. It is a core. So chemists are just by definition or training, when undergraduate training, we cover a lot of
Hmm.
aspects. And you've got to do organic chemistry if you're an organic chemist, but there's physical chemistry. There's lots of integration between chemical engineering and other flow properties and things like that you learn in the process. And you use all of those, and it's particularly physical chemistry. And you've really got to understand a good mathematical background. You're going to have a good
Mm.
mathematical background to really get your head around, um, particularly PK. And so you've really got to understand all of that. So I think in the chemistry degree, and certainly in the degree I did at Strathclyde, we covered a lot of that really deep fundamental, those deep fundamental aspects, which I can see and apply every single day in
Yes.
many aspects. And it's not just medicinal chemistry. Yes, medicinal chemistry is a something that you take organic chemistry by, you're designing small molecules, or not so small molecules.
Mm.
But you really have to be trying to think about all of these physical properties, interactions with other membranes. So you're taking lots of lipid chemistry as well. You're taking everything together and you're trying to use all of that wealth and experience that you've gathered and apply it in one direction,
Yeah.
which has got, everyone talks about multi-parameter optimization for medicinal chemistry. It really is. There's lots of different things you have to think about in the process to really understand the entire drug discovery route. And I think having that background training is incredibly useful, and I find it incredibly useful.
Yeah, and I think aside from the sort of technical aspects of what chemists do in the industry, I think it's also you develop a different perspective on things than the biologists do, right? Particularly
Yeah,
as the biology becomes more complex because the low hanging fruit we've picked a lot of, right? So we're having
yeah,
to look at the more complicated stuff. So it's more systems as a whole and all that kind of thing. Whereas I guess as a chemist, you really zero in on the sort of detail of what you're trying to develop.
exactly. The detail of what you're trying to develop, the detail of how things work on a
Yes.
molecular level, that's really where you start. But and a lot of a lot of the things we do, we have to, and I do encourage chemists to really dig in to the underlying molecular understanding, but really understand its role in a larger context. And
Mm.
so for drug discovery, it's understanding the biological processes, and it's trying to get your head around what those processes mean. And there are ways that you can relate that to reaction mechanistics and things like that. So
Yes.
it's essentially the same process, just on a larger scale. So if you're starting on the microscopic version, whenever you amplify that and take it to the larger macroscopic approach within a cell, it's similar approaches. It's similar. It's the same. It's the same mechanisms that are in play,
Mm.
just at a larger level. So it allows you to easily tap into protacs, larger
Right.
molecules like that. It allows you to tap into ADCs, antibody drug conjugates, and really think about protein engineering and oligo manufacture as well. I mean, that's a much larger thing, but at the end of the day, it's still a molecule. RNA is still
Yeah.
RNA or DNA is still a molecule, and so you've got to find ways to protect that, to deliver that, and do all those things. So chemists, you have to have that kind of mindset to be able to solve all those
Yeah.
problems.
And you've kind of touched on it there, but I guess inherently it's about making things, right? So if you
Yeah,
like making things, that's where to focus.
that is absolutely right. That is
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd always like to dive back into the origins of people's careers.
Hmm.
So for you personally, Kenny,
Yeah.
why chemistry? Why drug development? What was the sort of the early days of this career? Where did it come from for you?
It came from a lifelong interest in science.
Hmm.
I many moons ago, my family tells me that I think it was my maternal grandfather bought a chemistry set for me when I was 6 or something like that.
Okay.
So probably too young for the chemistry sets you
Yeah.
get now, and certainly then. But I am one of my best friends reminded me a few months ago that I used to bring. So part of that kit was to build copper sulfate crystals and things like that. So I would grow copper sulfate crystals at home and bring them in to
Right.
show my friends. And I think I was the only person that was really interested in that. But anyway, but it started there. I've always had an interest in science. When it came to getting to high school and trying to think, what do I really want to do? Science was, and particularly chemistry and physics, were the easiest subjects for me. I found those
Right.
just naturally understandable. And then, so I at one point decided I want to be an architect. I thought that was fantastic. Just to your point, as you said earlier about building things, I really
Yes.
I wanted to do that. And then I realized shortly after that, I didn't have enough artistic talent to really do that. So I decided just to say, okay, what can I continue to do that builds things that has a bit of creativity, and
Yes.
naturally found organic chemistry and chemistry in general. And when I was around about 16 or 17, I saw this photograph from I think it was from a company literature, and it was a picture of someone sitting in front of an old silicon graphics machine with a
Hmm.
compound docked into a protein. And I looked at the people sitting in front of this screen and I thought, that looks like the coolest job in the world. You get to build things, but it's still chemistry. And
Yes.
so from that point on, I just researched and tried to find out, what do I need to do? Okay, I need to go to college. I need to go to university and go and study chemistry. And then when I was in there, I would ask people and try and find out. And okay, it's helpful, not important, but helpful to have a PhD sometimes. So,
Yep.
and went on in that path, step by step by step, just finding out little bit by little bit. Sometimes it felt like stumbling, but I didn't have a grand scheme and be able to trigger on it, but it was I just found the interests and chased the passions.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
And your first sort of foray properly into the industry was with Cyclocell.
yeah.
And I guess those early 2000s were kind of um, the heyday in some ways of the British biotech industry, right?
Hmm.
So tell us a bit about what that was like, and what those first memories of industry were like for you.
Yeah. Oh, good memories. Good memories. It was a heyday of British biotech at that time. I was very fortunate to really finish my PhD around about that time frame,
Mm,
finished in 2001, 2002. And I had decided, I looked at a couple of postdocs in the States and Europe and around about, and I decided that no, this is the job I really want to do. This is where I'm really passionate about. I'm not going to waste any time. And
yes.
it seemed that's the wrong way to probably describe it as a waste, because you learn a huge amount in a postdoc. But I wanted just to get into industry, and
Mm,
I tried a few. I had done a few interviewed in a few places, and wasn't prepared enough in some of them, and was super prepared in others. And the Cyclocell one came along, and they took a shot on me, and I had the most fun in that job, because I went from all of the things I thought I knew about medicinal chemistry to learning about all the things I didn't know.
right.
And
Okay.
and it was drinking from the fire hose for 4 years solid, and it was
Yes.
fantastic. And I worked on oncology, non-oncology, lots of kinases in that company, obviously, but
Hmm.
it was in a range of different kinases. So I learned a huge amount, and it really helped me set up. So and it was
Yeah.
an exciting time for the industry, and particularly in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. And this may have changed, I suppose, for people who are doing their PhDs now, or it may still be the same. But what you mentioned, that sort of you learned all the things that you didn't know.
Yes.
And what do you think, on reflection, were the big differences between industry, not industrial chemistry, but industry chemistry, and what you'd been doing academically?
It was, I think, the first realization. I got some of these realizations at the end of my undergrad, where you're
Mm,
finishing up and you realize, oh, this subject goes really well. You learned about this and it felt like it was in a silo, and then you learned
okay.
about this and it felt like it was in a silo, and then it started to come together in the final year of undergrad, and you go, okay, this is how these all work and how they're all interrelated. Same thing happened in industry, and I got to
Yes.
see how biology and lead discovery teams work together. and how you really have to have a highly effective team and great communication. And all of those things are a little different from academic chemistry when you're in the PhD, struggling through your PhD. To really get there, you've got to learn a lot of new skills fast, and it was exciting from that point of view. I thought it was really good. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And then, so you began to develop your career, of course, began to progress
Mhm.
and sort of move forward as a scientist first of all, and then take on some leadership roles,
Yeah.
and eventually into sort of executive roles, and out to the US at one point in your career as well,
Yeah.
which is where you still are today. Tell us about, I guess, the journey that led to the leadership staff, and then also took you out to the US.
The US one came first, really. It was my wife is a chemist as well. We met in college, we met in
Okay.
university, and she was working for a company that did oligo
Hmm.
manufacturing. And so her organization closed their site in the UK in mid 2005, 2006 timeframe. And she had an opportunity to come and set up and work to set up a development team. So it was his process development team.
Yeah.
I had been 4 years, almost 5 years at Cyclacel, and it was a difficult decision because I thought I was starting to make some good progress in the industry and get to know people. But essentially, what I was going to do was throw it all away and start again,
Right.
and that was a challenge. But a challenge I thought this is the Boston area is one of the biggest places
Yep.
and most concentrated areas for biotech. So if I can, it's a real test for me. If I can do it there, I'm actually good at this, and I'm
Yes.
really happy to. So personal challenge as well. So we did that, and my first role was really working as a contract chemist with a company
Hmm.
called Infinity. They were doing a large DOS library work. So that was, again, it sampled from some of the things I did in my PhD. It was really exciting chemistry, but then got a med chem role where we basically repurposed or found a new target for a clinical program and tried to spin that out, and it was a kinase, and spin it into a new program. And
Yeah.
from then on, I'd gone at that point from a transition to bench chemist to leading CROs and to augment the bench chemistry that was going on. And then I moved after that 4 years at Xanthus Pharmaceuticals as it was to Antisoma when
Hmm.
they acquired Xanthus. And then I moved. That company went under, unfortunately. I just had a couple of phase 3 failures. It's always tough
Yeah.
for a small company to do that. But then moved to Epizyme. And at Epizyme, I had an opportunity to get in, leverage everything I had there learned before, lead a program to candidate, and really work on another program, which, is a backup chemist for another program, which now is tasmetastat.
Yes.
And so it was great to see as the compound moved from discovery through clinical development and eventually into approval. It was great to really be in those meetings to learn as much as I could and actually got to really eventually do a lot of things to support that program through my entire 9 years at Epizyme. So, and
Yes.
in that time, as that program moved, my career essentially developed and moved. And so, from a management point of view, it was co-leading a program and
Hmm.
then co-leading alliance from our company side, being an alliance partner, and it's broadened the scientific expertise and oversight. And then I gradually moved into department oversight and
Yeah.
department leverage, and so on, and then moved into research management as well. So it's been a gradual. You learn more, you show you can do things, and just kind of build up, and people trust what you're doing because you
Yes.
make the right decisions along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back to the sort of leadership development part of it.
Yeah.
But I was interested in sort of your memories of moving out to Boston, because I think sometimes over this side of the Atlantic, we sort of
Mhm.
know that there's this big biotech hub there, but until you actually get out there and walk around a little bit, you don't really get it in the same way that you
Yeah, that's
do
true.
once you have. But yeah, interested in your sort of recollections on that move.
I remember seeing I think it was a BioCity map, and it had all of these companies, and I thought, surely this can't be true, that all
Hmm.
of these companies. And then you walk through the Cambridge area, and it's right. Everyone
Yeah.
is right on top of each other. You go for lunch, you can't talk about what you're doing because your competitor might be right behind you.
Yes.
You might be working on the same target, and it's at the same time. Uh, I don't feel it's never been claustrophobic. It's just been
Mm,
a real buzz because you get to talk to lots of people, you get to meet lots of new people, and you get lots of shared experiences because everyone who's made it there and is working there quite often has a different background and very different approach in how they got there, and so
right.
you learn a lot from all of those conversations, and it really is everyone is on top of each other, and it's a very
Yes.
small area essentially. Well, there's a lot of large and small companies.
Yeah, there is. I was amazed there was even graffiti that detailed the history of some of these companies just on the wall and things like
Exactly.
that. But the point you make there is really important because that success that companies have had there is compounded, right? So there
Yep.
was, there was some companies sort of were the breakout companies, and then the people who ran those businesses stuck around and did other things, and their experience multiplies, and then
Mm-hmm.
this thing snowballs, right? And I think
Yep.
you sort of see it here in Cambridge, UK. Like it's not the same as Cambridge, Massachusetts, obviously in terms of the level, but it's further along than the other hubs because there
Yes.
have been some successes, and so that then compounds. Um,
I, I,
and
I, I agree. I mean, it felt like it was the start of a hub when I was in Dundee,
right,
and this started because we were right next to another company that was doing kind of
yes,
parasites and things like that, and it was really exciting. And then it kind of weathered away because funding left, and that was it. And it was a real shame because it felt really quite embryonic, but quite exciting. And that sounds like that's what's going on right now in Cambridge, UK. I love it.
yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's a window, isn't there? If
Yeah.
you have a couple of big successes in that window, then
Mhm.
it's away.
Yep.
And if those big successes don't come, then as you say, the emphasis shifts, and it's a little bit like sort of when AstraZeneca left Alderley Park and went down to Cambridge, then there's a bit of a scene up there, but it's not like it was, and it's kind
Mhm.
of these sliding doors moments make a big
Yeah,
difference and
they do.
can transform a place.
They really do.
Um, but so you also started down this journey of developing as a leader and
Yeah.
taking on more and more responsibility. And of course, the program leadership, I guess, is a natural evolution of being a scientist and taking on more responsibility.
Mhm.
But then the alliance leadership and the department management, those often require some additional skills.
Yeah.
So, how did you sort of learn to be a leader and to deal with people? And or was that something that came naturally to you? Or tell us about that journey for you.
It's a great question. I think even going from um, being part of the broader team to eventually leading a program
Mm,
in discovery context was it's I realized I had there was certain ways I thought about a project, and I would always try to think, okay, particularly say I need to, if you're in a large synthetic, I'll take it back to synthetic chemistry because I
yes,
always do.
yes,
If you have a long synthesis, you have to make sure you've got your start materials and everything
right.
coming through. You've got to do exactly the same thing for a project. So
Hmm.
it's essential project management. So you've really got to be able to know, I want to be able to do this by this time. I need to have this in place. I need to understand this, this, and this.
Right.
And it's really taking that step back. And I think the important thing for me was to learn how to initially take that step back from what I'm doing day to day, the way that the workup that I'm doing, the isolation of whatever final compound it was, to be
Hmm.
able to take back a moment and go talk to someone and say, tell me what you're doing and tell me how you approach it. And being able to, allowing you, giving myself time to do that, to step back and think about much more like a 5,000 foot view, a 10,000 foot view, trying to think of that way. That has been the most crucial aspect from a project management point of view, from a
Yes.
chemistry leadership point of view, and it still applies from a executive level point of view. You have to really be effective. You've got to be able to step back, and I really enjoy helping folks in my team take that moment to step back and say, okay, from this point of view, from this person's point of view, this is what the program looks like right now. How do you answer this, this, and this question? And that's the crucial part. And it's, if you can work out how to develop that skill, and again, it's communication and understanding of what everyone else has got to do.
Mm,
If I was working with a biology lead who tells me, yes, we'd love to see the compound in this xenograft, how long does it take? You've got to order, you've got to set up, you've got to culture cells. There's a lot of things in there, and there's a lot of
Yes.
time frames. So you've got to understand how long it takes to do all of these things, and really when everyone has confidence in the right stage. And if you can learn that skill, I personally think that that's applicable to every aspect of functional management and even executive management as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So
because you
being
just have
able
to
to,
do it again and again.
yeah, absolutely. So being able to zoom out and see that context. And also
Yes,
you mentioned something within that about seeing the picture from the other person's perspective as well.
correct, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I'd ask people, okay, what's your thoughts on this? What do you think about this?
Yes.
And I'd get a very different approach from what I was thinking and the way I looked at it. And so it's taking a moment to say, okay, to really listen to what they've said and then try to ask the right follow-up questions. Maybe not
Mm,
right away, but to think about it and then go back and ask the right questions. Okay, how do we solve this problem together?
yes.
Do that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then talk us through the next part that brings us up to today of
Yeah.
sort of how you ended up at Accent and the 4 years that you've had there.
Yeah, so I had been I think I'd mentioned at Epizyme, and we managed to get
Mm,
tazemetostat approved. I had been talking to some of my former colleagues because the founder, one of the founders, Bob Copeland, was founding CSO at Epizyme, and he eventually called me and said, "Kenny, you've done a lot there. You've done a huge amount, but this time I was VP of Chemistry at Accent, sorry, at Epizyme." And they said, we've got these really interesting targets
mm,
and some really, it's going to take some challenges to solve these problems and find these drugs. Do you want a new challenge? I was like,
right.
absolutely. So that was it. And the opportunity to really be a part of an executive team and learn more about building and running the company. That was the big driver because I had an opportunity to talk to a lot more different people, many more different people with
Yes.
very different backgrounds. So finance
Right.
and business development, and really learn from those folks again, learn from my colleagues again. And I've really enjoyed that aspect. And that was the I think the big driver was really to be in that executive team role, and really help push the company forward and have to
Yes.
think from an organizational point of view. What do I have to do? And honestly, some of the same thought processes are very similar. You've got to everything I learned about stepping back is absolutely crucial. Yeah.
What do you think have been some of the key learns then during that time? Because like you said, it's one thing to sort of consider other perspectives of perhaps scientists from different disciplines
Yep.
and things like that. But then as you say, you've got finance people and lawyers and marketers and all the
Yep.
all these sort of varied perspectives. What have been the
Yeah.
sort of the 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 most interesting learns through that period, do you think?
The most interesting learns for me, I think, have really been what is your product you're eventually going to be trying to market and sell,
Yeah.
and being in marketing setup meetings through my career, be able to hear how this is going to be pitched to doctors and eventually patients, how this you have to think about what it really means for the patients. And
Mm,
so it's really important to stay and stay focused on what the end goal is. There are patients in desperate need, and we have to find a way to help them out. And we've really got to think about that's got to be the driver. The reason for getting up in the morning is to go and try and do something and to push science forward and have a
yes.
chance of getting a patient helped at the end of the day. So you've got to do that, and it's realize that your role as a scientist is a tiny part. It's a crucial part, but it's a tiny part. And you've got to learn a lot about commercial aspects. You've got to read, follow the news, really understand what the giant ecosystem is doing, and I really get on top of that as much as you possibly can. If you don't know, go and ask.
Hmm.
And so that is, I think that's a key learning for me, and it's nothing's in isolation. And you've got to understand more about the broader industry and what's coming up in terms of registration, what's coming up in the FDA, how's
Right.
that going to affect what you do further down the line, what's happening in Congress, and how that's going to affect
Yes.
coming down the line, what's happening in geopolitics, because that has a big effect on the CROs you work with.
Mm,
And so there's a lot of you've really got to put your finger on the pulse of a lot of things and really and it's just drinking from the world of lots of information. So again, it's a similar theme, but I think the biggest learnings are don't make assumptions in what you're
Yes.
doing. Don't make assumptions. You understand what's going on, and be happy to ask the dumbest question that you think is the dumbest question that you can think of, because you will learn a lot. And I guarantee that someone else is probably asking the same thing, or
Yeah.
haven't understood what you're doing and your understanding of it as well as you do. And so you've really got to work on telling that story. And there's a lot of storytelling and how you get your point across. You might have to really bring together a very, very difficult concept, and drill it down into okay, these are the consequences if we do this. These are the consequences if we don't, and so on and so forth. And that's eventually how you have to, again, it's from a scientific level, you do that, and then you have to use it for management as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, there's that thread that runs through, isn't there? It's sort of, strategic decision making is come up with a hypothesis, look at the pros and cons,
Yep.
figure out how you're going to execute it. If it makes more sense to do it than not do it, try it, see if it works. There's a very similar thread.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things was really what I at an early stage scientist, what I thought was strategy wasn't. It was really technical. It wasn't.
Right.
So every time you think you're there, when you take that further step back from where you are, you realize there's another level of strategy on top of that. And everything else becomes technical details. And you've got to be able to explain the underlying technical process to allow you to understand the right strategy going forward. Yeah. So again, it's fold after fold after fold of understanding that.
I think it's a massively misunderstood concept in general, to be honest. I read an article about this at the weekend, because that's what I do with my weekends. But it was basically, this guy was saying that what most companies talk about when they talk about strategy is actually planning.
Yeah.
Whereas strategy is this different thing. Strategy is what forest are we in? What game are we playing? What's the outcome we're looking for? What that kind of stuff. And I think, people have this sort of. I think people both overcomplicate it and oversimplify it at the same time. If that's possible.
Yeah, and I'm as guilty as anyone else, because again, I'm still learning as a scientist and as a leader, and we are always still learning, and there's always things you can brush up and polish on and fix. Yeah.
No, of course. And on that topic, this may be something you've already talked about, but if you think back to coming out of Strathclyde, perhaps, and out into the wide world of biotech, what are the things that you know now that you would pass on to yourself if you bumped into yourself then?
Great question. Don't sweat the small stuff, probably. So I think it would be you hear this a lot from people, just say follow your passions, but if you're really interested in something, then don't underestimate your ability to really push it and drive. If you have been able to develop that drive and passion and willingness to work hard on something, to understand it, then stick with it. And it's not necessarily going to be just chemistry. And if you're a chemist, for example, coming out of Strathclyde, you don't have to be a bench chemist. You can do, as I said, you've got the training to do pretty much anything you want. I have touched on all of the things I mentioned before, including patent law, and tried to learn about patent strategy and understanding what a patent is and getting information I need from it. And that has a huge impact on what you do as a company, what you have. And all of that information has been very, very useful in my career going forward. So I think if I'm going to say anything to myself, it would be, if you are interested in something, keep following up on it. It will, you might not know when it's going to come useful, but it will be useful at some point. Learn and continue to read and continue to ask questions, because the one thing that would be a bad advice for myself going back would be just focus on this because it will all work out. No, you got to just keep as broad and as interested as possible. And
of course,
that it provides its own path for success and opportunity. as it has
Yeah.
for me.
No, that's it. And I think you're right. It's a concept that's often floated around, but I think again is sometimes misunderstood. Is that especially now in the world we're in today, where you can connect with anyone around the world on any topic, if you try to, actually you can probably be successful at more or less anything, right?
Yeah,
So that's not to say follow your passions as in go and live on a beach and don't do anything.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like you say,
exactly.
if you find something really interesting, there's probably a path that you can follow that keeps you engaged with that thing, right?
I totally agree.
Some paths are easier than others. Some
True.
paths are less well trod than others, but because of the reach we all now have, it's much easier for you to find that niche and find that way to make the thing you're interested in your
Yeah,
career, right?
it absolutely is. And again, I think the other thing I would say to myself is, if you keep going here, if you keep trying different things and being open to new experiences, you'll learn a lot. And I did not think for one moment when I was finishing up in college that I would be in the US, that
Right.
I would be working in this area, and that I would have contributed to a number of different candidates in compounds in the clinic, and are really trying to help a broader team push the next couple of candidates that our company's trying to do into the clinic in the short future. So it's still endlessly exciting, and you just gotta let it let the cards fall where they may. Yeah,
Yes.
I did
And
not think I would be able to do this at this point, and I'm really
okay.
over the moon that I would have this opportunity. Yeah,
And do you think it is that sort of following your following the things that engage you, following the things that you're interested in that's allowed that to happen?
yeah, I think it is. I think it
Yeah.
is. Being open to opportunities as it comes. I just,
Yes.
hey, you have a chance to go to the States. Maybe 2 years, 17, 18 years later, you're still enjoying your career. It's a crucial part of it. It really is. And yeah, you never know what the opportunities are going to be. Just
Hmm.
keep your eyes open for things, and chase the things that are interesting for you. And you don't have to move if you're still having
No.
fun. And that's it. I know some people worry about, oh, I've got to move out of chemistry. I've got to move out of this. This is the area that's coming up. You mentioned it earlier on, Tom, about, there's lots of hot areas.
Yes.
It's kind of cyclical. All of it
Yes.
is quite cyclical, and it will come back around. Small molecule drug discovery is not over. It may
Nope.
change its shape. It may look a little different, but again, the skills you have, it will come around. Science is not moving that fast. We're not at the Star Trek era where you just buzz up a cure straight away. It's not there yet.
Yeah.
And there's so much novel biology that we just don't understand yet. So there's lots of ways to interrogate that. So
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you try and be too calculated with your choices of, what degree you take or what PhD you
yeah,
do or these sorts of things, you're almost setting yourself up to fail, right? Because if you go for what's hot now, in 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, it's going to be something different, right? So
yeah.
if you do it based on that criteria, actually, that's not a good basis to make a decision on these
Tough.
things, I don't
It's really
think.
tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
predict the future.
No.
As I said, I would love to know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kenny, I think that's a brilliant point for us to finish on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Um, really enjoyed the conversation and a ton of insight in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the time, Tom. Thank you. Take care.